With that, Eric and Steve, we're going to transition now to end of life for Dynamics GP announced. What's next? I'm sure you guys have a ton of opinions on this. Eric, guys, for those of y'all who don't know, he actually lives in Tampa. He has real strong lungs. He blew the storm south just a bit, ended up not losing power at all. Can't believe he survived it. Steve's got powerful lungs too. Steve, you're a long distance runner. How far have you run? What's your longest you've ever taken a jog for?
The longest I've made it so far is 84 miles. And
And
I'm hoping
in 1 month?
100. Yeah, yeah. That was in 25 hours.
In 25 hours. All right. Second one we're going to do. If any of y'all on this chat has a record of one jog, you laced up your shoes and you left your house and you came back 80 something miles later or further, put your name in here. We need to meet you for sure. So Eric, Steve, either one of y'all are both experts in this space. Let me take a back seat to this conversation. Tell me what's going on and why is this a topic worth talking about?
I guess maybe I could kind of start a little bit here, James, but as obviously the client account manager here with Center Technologies, had a lot of conversations with a lot of folks that I work with who are using Dynamics GP Great Plains as their ERP solution. And through business reviews, I always get the question, probably over the last year and a half, hey, Eric, when is Microsoft going to give an official announcement as far as end of support for Dynamics GP Great Plains? And I said, so far they haven't given a specific date or an announcement saying, hey, here's the final days of Dynamics GP Great Plains. They've mentioned that they would have support at least through 2028 and beyond. But other than that, they haven't given a specified date. But more recently, or just recently, we've actually had a formal announcement coming from Microsoft. So this is a pretty big deal for a lot of folks who are, like I said, still using Dynamics GP Great Plains. What do they decide to do moving forward? Start putting together a roadmap strategy and start looking at their options, which would be, in this case, in the Microsoft ecosystem, moving or transitioning from Great Plains over to the cloud Microsoft ERP solution, which would be Dynamics 365 Business Central.
Yeah, Eric, that was a good introduction. Steve, for the thousands of people on right now that have GP still, and the tens of thousands that don't know the GP world well on listening today, how can you tell them at just a sentence or two of what are we talking about? What is Great Plains? What is GP?
Yeah, GP is an ERP system, so it's your accounting, your operations, your inventory, your billing. It's everything you need to be able to run your business, and it's Microsoft's one of their early acquisitions into that space. So it's a long-standing product that Microsoft acquired, and it has lots of fans. So it's a product that's been around forever. A lot, like you mentioned, lots of users on that system. Now looking for a home, looking for a transition and a plan.
Perfect. Thank you for doing that. I always forget myself, since we live inside these walls at Center, there's always a couple on listening who say, what is Great Plains? What's GP? What are they even talking about? So now that Microsoft announced a sunset date, which Eric, you cracked me up just now with that comment, we're going to support it from till 2028 and beyond. So just tell us indefinitely then, Microsoft. You don't need to be so cryptic. I guess y'all built some slides, a couple of things we're going to show. Do y'all want to jump into this kind of systematically? What do y'all want to share about on this topic?
Sure. I think it'd be good if you jump ahead a slide. We can talk about this. This will just be the bullet points. Let's just jump right into the next slide and we'll talk about.
Yeah, no problem.
Because you mentioned, that you're right. They had this kind of cryptic way of saying, this certain date and beyond. And like we all knew the writing on the wall. And I've been using GP. I started back this over 20 something years ago, right? So I'm one of those. I was a big fan of GP. I still like GP. Made the transition to Business Central, but we all knew this was coming. But here's the official word is out there. So these are just some things to keep in mind on how they're going to transition. And so you see there the dates here. So they're going to do it in a way that says, they're going to kind of phase people out. So it's going to kind of be an issue if companies are growing and they need to plan for this. This is where the roadmap comes in because it's not that far in the future here. The April 1st, 2025 says no more sales of new perpetual licenses. That means if you have an on-premise license or a perpetual license and you're expanding or making plans and there's some growth, you're going to hit a roadblock where you can't buy any more users. That's something you need to be planning for. The same on the subscription model, although they're going to go further out because Microsoft's more friendly to subscription models. But there's going to be this scenario where you need to be planning for, if we're doing an acquisition of another company, we need to bring on more users, we're expanding the business. Don't get caught with, well, I need some more users, but now I'm stuck. So it is good that they've given us that heads up on that. So it's not just support, but it's also the kind of, so to speak, wean you off of the product. And then the third bullet point about the support ending and the updates. So that is kind of mainstream support or kind of the primary support of, I got a problem, I call them up, I send a case, even if it comes to us. There's this point where no more. A lot of partners like Center are going to keep taking care of GP customers indefinitely, but obviously there's coming to this point where you can't really get true support from Microsoft. If there's a real problem, sorry, we don't support this anymore. That's coming. And then kind of on our, cybersecurity topics here, I mean, there's going to be security updates that are going to stop. And that seems like a long ways away. I know with those security updates, but it's also important to know that, we're GP, Great Plains is sitting on top of your Windows server systems, your SQL Server, and those have their own updates. And you got to be mindful of, if you don't stay current, if you don't stay with those products being updated, they have their own timeline of those older versions of the OS and older versions of SQL are going to hit some of the same roadblocks, maybe even sooner. So it's just critical to be planning for this. And it is good in a way that we finally got an official word of what everyone knew was coming.
Yep, Steve, that project plan, road mapping your different needs, that could be, I don't know what's sitting in your data center. Maybe you have a co-location contract, you have warranty agreements with different manufacturers, hardware and software, and then end of life, like you just mentioned, for each of those. So an investment there may lock you in further than this timeline allows. Y'all done a lot of ERP changes and moves before. What's the normal length of time that someone plans for that move? Is that something that just takes a couple of weeks, or do they put a year's planning, 2 years planning into that kind of thing?
So the planning, you do need to be thinking about it. The project itself is not going to be a year, but you want to be planning ahead for this. A typical project could be 2 to 3 months, depending on the complexity. Some will go faster, some will go a little further, depending on how deep and how extensive and how complicated the business is. But you do need to be planning, like you mentioned. You might be in a contract with a group that's hosting GP for you, and need to be able to see, are they keeping up to date? Are they taking care of things? Are they fitting the timeline that I have? So yeah, that timeline is important. But you can plan for, most people are thinking about. In fact, I'm an ex-accountant, so accountants like to think about October as budget season. So a lot of companies are going through right now budgeting for next year. And part of that timeline, if you're thinking about this move, is when is that going to happen? What quarter am I going to be looking at this move and budgeting for the move? And depending on how you're doing GP today and who's supporting it and things, the cost is going to vary on the move. But now's the time to be thinking about your budget plans for next year also.
Yeah, this is perfect. Yeah, I think that's the spot that I always go back to. Is it's one thing when they say, I'll give a hypothetical, VMware vSphere 6.5 out of support, you must upgrade to 7. Fine, but they're saying GP, the product, is going to be sunset and going away. It's not just a variation of a level of it. It's fully going away.
That is correct. It is important to note that there are versions of GP currently, and Eric, I know you get a lot of these requests about, hey, I'm on version, let's say, for example, GP 2015. Am I good? Well, no, you're not good. There are versions of GP that are being support is stopping. So this is support in general, like you said, James. But
Yes, sir.
to the same point, there are versions of GP that if you're not staying current and you're not staying at least, there's a certain level here that we can certainly get more details on, but you have to stay in that window also prior to this end of life. So it's important. We have a lot of conversations where they're seeing version X is coming to end of support on a certain date. Not just talking about the sunset of all of it, but a certain date for a version. Those are driving a lot of conversations that Eric and I are having also about people realizing or getting concerned. Where am I at just within the life cycle of what I have? Even if they have plans to be off of GP in another year, they're getting concerned. They're getting asked. IT directors are being asked by executives and boards. Well, wait a minute. I'm hearing this chatter. Where are we, guys? Where do we stand? And actually putting the proper attention on what really can be the core part of the business, right? Sometimes doesn't get the attention it deserves. We just need to be looking at those timelines for the versions also.
Question came in on the chat, Eric. I don't know if this is more on your side or not, but do you know if the no new sales means that existing contracts can't increase quantities? If I'm grandfathered in with perpetual licenses per se, can I add to that, or am I out at that stage?
I was going to say, Steve, I think,
you cannot add at that date.
We won't be able to add after that date.
That is correct.
So you're going to see an influx of people buying extra licenses so they have those in case they wind up needing them. That's a waste. And then second, it may force you out of perpetual into subscription. Are there blends of that? Do people have both perpetual and subscription GP licenses?
You can't do a blend, but there are some, depending for people that have had GP for a long time, maybe more than 5 to 10 years. Most of those are probably on perpetual. There are some more recent ones that are on subscription, or if you're with us or with another firm that is hosting it, you could be on a subscription model, but you can't mix. And in both of those cases, when that date hits, you will not be able to increase the user count. So there's not really a grandfathered scenario.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I want to move on to the next.
Yeah, let's go on.
Slide.
Sure.
Yeah.
I
think this one, just really quick, Steve, in a lot of these business reviews, a lot of the customers are asking me, well, I'm wanting to start to have the conversation of looking into transitioning off of Dynamics GP Great Plains. Obviously, if you're looking at Microsoft, that would be moving then to Dynamics 365 Business Central. But a lot of clients that I speak with, they say, hey, Eric, what are specific incentives that Microsoft is offering to make that transition? So, usually I've got Steve on those calls and conversations, and there are a couple of different options that companies have that they could look into.
Right. The main thing here is there's a lot of questions about, let me make sure I understand this, or I'm not going to have to buy that other product. Is it going to be am I just transitioning over? We want to make it real clear that it's not like, oh, I'm going to have to buy, let's say, for example, Business Central. That's what Microsoft wants you to go to. It's the cloud ERP version. But the question is that going to cost me something? I have to buy that. What happens to my investment I made in GP, or if I'm on a subscription license? Does it just port over? What's the scenario? So number one, if you're current on your maintenance, which is sometimes you're in a manual maintenance scenario, if you're on perpetual license, or if you're paying your subscription, that's going to port over. So the scenario is, just at a high level, you're going to carry over kind of your annual spend now. And you can think of it as that gives you the right, or that kind of helps you transition over to Business Central should you choose to go that route. But they want to make it better than that, right? Because a lot of people will say, well, this is why it's so important to have these conversations is, some companies are going to say, well, now's a good time to look around. Well, obviously Microsoft, and we want you to stay in the family. So there's some incentives here. So this first one about bridge to cloud, what that means is there is a 40% promotional discount to go from GP to a Business Central subscription license. And there's a calculation that basically says the equivalency of spending X with GP and a certain number of users means Y with Business Central, and Business Central has very attractive pricing, but they give you a substantial discount to do that. When you go that route, You don't have to say switch to BC right away. I call it BC as Business Central. You can make that commitment. So your plan is to go there and move from Business Central or from GP to Business Central, and you have 3 years to do it. You don't have to do it right away. Now, again, we have to keep in mind, the scenario that we talked about with GP and its timeline, but you're going to be able to keep using GP. So that's why the dual access rights is shown there. You'll switch to a subscription, so you won't have an annual maintenance. You'll just be paying a monthly price that could be equivalent to what you're paying now if you're on subscription, or some, equivalency of your annual. But the point is, they're not saying do it now, force a project right away. You're not under the gun. There's still time here, and there's incentives from the dollar perspective, and there's flexibility on I continue to use GP until I'm ready within this little short time frame. We work with you strategically to make a plan and to get you over there without saying, oh my gosh, I only have a few months to make this transition. That's not the scenario. So we're in good shape as far as the incentives go.
Steve, I think we've had enough Microsoft experience to know that when they want something done, they put these incentives in place because they fully intend to not look back. Sometimes you see these announcements where they're going to kick the can. This one's been kicked. The can's already been down that path. And so now we're at that final stage, like you're saying. So that's a perfect description. Grace asked a wonderful question from the perspective of the user leveraging GP on a daily basis. When those dates pass, does it just turn off? Do they not get access anymore? What are they going to feel as those dates go beyond the support dates?
Right. That's a great question, Grace. And Grace is a longtime customer. Good to have you on here. Nothing is really going to happen from a day-to-day user perspective of it's not going to turn off the system, right? It's going to be more of,
you're on your own.
You're on your own. Now,
yeah.
If you're a customer with us, we're going to take care of you. But right, we're going to be in that position where there's only so much we can do if something really goes wrong. And again, we're talking about not just GP, but the underlying. You're going to start hitting some roadblocks. Like if you're not on a current version of GP, then it means you're probably not on a current version of SQL or Windows. And now we start hitting those walls. And so, although nothing's going to happen that day or that week, that month, you're going to be on your own. Again, we'll help you, but we don't have the safety net or the backup from Microsoft, and we're putting ourselves at risk in multiple areas, including security. So we don't want to go through that. We don't want customers to face that.
Yeah, so I'll take it a step further too, Grace. The issue might be more on your IT team. They have measures on all of their programs and software, all their systems, on how they're measuring patching and updating security patches and support needs. As these fall off, these become targets for hackers. And now we have no protection because the vulnerabilities that may be leveraged to get into the system are no longer being patched by the manufacturer to help close those open doors. So your IT team will be screaming about this. The business, though, won't stop operating unless or until someone breaches the program and gets into your organization. Now, if you were on the earlier classes that we did, there was a lot of talk about just that. How do you close those open doors? How do you find them? How do you see them? This will be one that's a high critical, glaring issue in the IT department. But Steve, good answer. Day to day won't stop. Grace, if we missed the intent of the question, throw another one in there. We're happy to talk more on that topic. That was a good one. All right, guys, I'm pushing forward to the next slide. Is that a good time?
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is more about what your options are as far as migrating, and there's a few aspects here. I'll hit these quickly because I know we got another slide to go. But there are some migration tools that effectively say, let's make it easier to go from GP to Business Central. And although it's not a copy paste, you can't copy paste an ERP system. There are tools to get our data moved, to get our business processes moved, and of course we're experts in that. And I think we're one of the strong firms in the sense of our knowledge of GP and Business Central, and our crossover talent makes it really important that we can help you assess what you've got and use those tools that are in place. There's different methods here. So we usually help build a roadmap and give you options on, Do you want to go directly from GP to Business Central? That's one option. Do you want to go from, if you have GP on premise or with another hoster, do you want to go to Center's private cloud and let us help you take care of that? Or if you're already in a private cloud, do you want to go ahead and, even with us, maybe if you decide when do you want to move to Business Central? So there's different options. And again, no one should feel under the gun about this in immediate terms, but you need a strategy and a roadmap. And Eric and I are on a lot of conversations where sometimes we're asked to go into a little depth and understand and work what fits best for that customer about what's the right path and what are the economics of that path too. So that we handle all those options.
Yeah. Is that all you want to touch on this topic?
Yeah,
let's go right
let's
through
go on to the other one since we're getting a little, yeah.
I like one thing, Steve, I just want to chime in before we move forward. I love what you said there. We're mutually equipped to support GP, even move GP off of perpetual into, say, an on-prem perpetual environment to a cloud hosted environment for a short term if they're running short on hardware timeframes or data center contracts. We got options. And I love you keep mentioning that. There's a lot of flexibility in how we do this so that it's painless or as painless as possible to your business along the way.
Yes. One more point about that. And when I was listening to some conversations earlier about, hackers taking ransomware and things, we've unfortunately had experience with having customers that we supported. They were not in our cloud, but they were in someone else's cloud, and it maybe wasn't up to par. And I have had experience where their entire GP was locked up, taken down, held for ransom, and it was because the entire that firm that they were using wasn't necessarily enterprise class, took them down. So the point of that is, if you're not sure what your current scenario is, or you're not comfortable with that, that's another option that we have a secure, comfortable environment.
Perfect.
So this last, go ahead.
Last one.
Last one here. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to maybe mention quick, Steve, for this slide right here. I think it's we've just recently had a conversation with a client of ours that's starting to look into Dynamics 365 Business Central and moving to the cloud with Microsoft, and their current GP user today. And I remember the first thing he asked, he says, what's the first step? Where should we go and look at first when we're trying to maybe look into this transition? And you and I both mentioned it first. We said, you probably want to start with setting a meeting with us to have an assessment of your current GP environment, first and foremost. And then, let's see how that kind of measures up to transitioning over to Business Central. So just kind of wanted to lead in with that because that's like the first thing that they always ask, like, where do we start?
Right. It's a challenge on where do we start. And this is another area where I think Center can really excel, because we have, again, because of that long history that we have with GP, and we've been working with Business Central since it became a cloud product. That's over 6 years now. We understand GP at the expert level and now BC, but we can go in and see what you have, see what you're doing, understand how's that going to translate to GP or to BC. And a big difference there versus, let's say you go out and you're working with a partner that doesn't have, they're very strong in Business Central, but they don't have that much experience with GP. Maybe you don't get the same level of understanding of transitioning. Or if you're going outside the Microsoft family, they're just looking at, a new scenario. So they don't quite understand where you're coming from. So it's important to review that. It's important to do that next bullet, which is map here's how I do things today. How are they changing into Business Central? This is business, right? We're not changing business processes. We're still, your business processes that you have, ERP systems will handle it, right? But it's how you do things. How is GP set up? How's that going to map to what happens in Business Central? Okay, I have this. If, let's say, for example, if I'm a distributor and I've got a particular tool that integrates my warehouse shipping functions to UPS, you want to make sure, okay, well, is that in BC? How does that work? How, things that are operationally critical, we'll make sure they map. And then, after we have those discussions, again, we'll make recommendations on the path, on the timing, What are the best practices? What are the things even as basic as learning curve? You know, a lot of people ask Eric and I, okay, well, is Business Central just GP in the cloud? Well, no, not really. It's not. It's a different product. So what are the challenges going to be of learning curve of going from one product to another? And I always talk about how you know, it varies, of course. Some people love the idea that I've got a new cloud product. They're very cloud friendly. They wonder, why am I still on this GP that is not cloud based? And there's other people that are so comfortable with GP, they're worried about moving, they're worried about training, or about learning. Again, because we've been through this with a lot of customers, and then our multiple of us personally have gone from being a GP consultant to a Business Central consultant. We can give a lot of guidance and a lot of, I would say, hands-on. I like to think of white glove service to say, here's how you get from GP to BC comfortably. Here's how you get through the transition. We'll make those recommendations when we go through that assessment.
Yeah. So Steve, we have another Grace question. It's a good one. It's about cost associated to it. I was actually typing up a quick response in case we ran out of time. I think we got enough time though for us to talk about that topic. Do you want to touch on it first, or should I hammer that one head on?
Go ahead, and I'll follow up if you like.
Cool. That's great. Yeah, Grace, short answer is yes, there is a cost associated to it. A couple things that are unique about this, and Grace, I don't know the GP side near as well, so I'm unfamiliar if you're on-prem or hosted somewhere, but there is no version of BC on-prem. So at the very least, most are going through a cloud migration, and conceptually and physically, where we have to sunset the hardware that the GP program sits on. Microsoft may look at it as, hey, quite literally, it's one program you were paying for. Now you pay for another program. Costs are pretty much the same, but the effort to get there and to get BC in the same speaking language, the way you're used to using it, is indeed a project that will be an undertaking. Steve, how big that is probably case by case.
It is case by case, and Grace is in a good position because she's a current customer, and we're going to take good care of her. She's going to have some advantages of being a current customer going through that, but there still is a cost, and there's still effort. But we have, again, she's in a position that might be better than most in that she's well suited and should be ready to go to Business Central. But part of this assessment is understand the aspects, understand the costs, understand the user counts, do everything to help get through that, and make sure that the economics there for this to make sense.
So license type to license type, should a user expect it to be fairly similar in price point?
It depends on where they're coming from. If because hosters, there's usually a larger footprint. I would say in general, it's the price is the same, right? It depends on the level of support and things that you might have currently.
That makes sense.
But it's, when you include the all-in support of, everything you're doing from GP to BC, you should see maybe a little better, but generally it's not a big jump or anything like that.
Yeah, that's the way I tried to look at it. Was you're going to have a very similar licensing cost. It's the effort of getting it to a functional, getting BC to be functional for you, that's going to wind up having an expense that's more unavoidable. Grace probably is in a fortunate position to have a limited cost associated to it, but I think everyone should be thinking that the licensing's almost a transfer. Maybe it's a different form, a subscription versus perpetual, but the effort of getting there is an unavoidable expense. Yes. Luckily, you have a couple of years, a year, 6 months, whatever, to plan for it. So, or it's not something that's going to be too much of a surprise. Steve, Eric, we are out of time. Do you have anything else you want to leave the group with before we close?
I was just going to say, appreciate the opportunity to kind of speak with everyone today. I'm going to be having a lot of conversations. I know it's coming, because a lot of people already started to receive emails from their IT directors, and they're already starting to reach out to me saying, hey, Eric, I think we need to have a conversation now about what does a roadmap strategy look like for us to make this transition off of Dynamics GP Great Plains and starting to look more into Dynamics 365 Business Central.
Mm-hmm. Good finish, Eric. I totally agree. Steve, Eric, thank you guys for being a part of this today.
Thank you.